Good evening everyone, and welcome to the February 2nd, 2015 regular meeting of Council. First of all, I wish to respectfully recognize the Coast Salish nations upon whose traditional territory we are located. First up this evening is the adoption of the minutes of the public hearing held January 19th, 2015. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? Councillor Beale, seconded by Councillor Powell. Comments? Observations? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Minutes of the council meeting held January 19th, 2015. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Oates. Any comments, deletions, additions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We also have with us this evening, we have the agenda before you. You've had it now for a few days. Do I have a mover and a seconder that the February 2nd, 2015 council meeting agenda be approved? Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Oates. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That's carried. This evening we start off, we have one presentation. It's by Staff Sergeant Brian Hunter of the RCMP Oceanside Detachment. And the topic is the 2014 year-end statistics, which I believe everyone has copies. So, good evening, Staff Sergeant Hunter, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Worship, Council, for allowing me to attend your meeting this evening. I'm going to recap the crime statistics for the City of Parksville 2013 as opposed and compared to 2014. But before I do that, there's some new council here, and I'd just like to give a quick overview of the detachment and the number of members we have and our policing area. We are a blended detachment where I have 3 contracts, 2 municipal contracts, one with the City of Parksville, one with the Town of Qualicum Beach, and we also have a rural policing contract. The Town of Qualicum Beach pays for 8 police officers, population about 8,600. The City of Parksville, with a population just under 12,000, pays for 16 police officers. And the rural area, about 26,000 people, there's 13 police officers that are paid by the province. Sometimes when you look at the numbers of population of a community compared to the number of police officers that are contracted, one might wonder why there's a certain number for a certain population and it doesn't seem to equate for the others. And what we go by is the crime rate within a community and the caseload of the members. How busy are the members relative to the amount of crime happening in that area? And in that regard, there are, according to the 2013 Police Resources Crime Stats put out by the province, there are 32 municipalities with a population between 5,000 and 15,000. We call them muni-unders. And certainly Qualicum Beach and the City of Parksville fall within that. And the crime rate for the City of Parksville, and a crime rate is the number of reported crimes per 1,000 population. For the City of Parksville, the crime rate is 84, which is 18th down on the list of those 32 municipalities. The crime rate for the Town of Qualicum Beach is 38, well less than half the crime rate of the City of Parksville. And that's not to say Parksville has a high crime rate, but there is quite a difference there. So you cannot compare populations with the number of police officers. The caseload for the City of Parksville police officers is 24th down on the list of the 32 municipalities, and the Town of Qualicum Beach is 6th down on the list. So we are a busy detachment. Violent crime is not prevalent in this community. We do deal with property crimes. The detachment has 3 main priorities that we focus our energies on in the community, that being traffic enforcement, maintaining safe roads for our community, Youth is a priority. Working with the youth in our community and really focusing on those positive interactions and developing those relationships with the youth. And the other priority at the detachment is a priority of crime reduction with a focus on property crime and drugs. The two are correlated in a community, and we have a crime reduction strategy at the detachment to deal with that. And just real briefly, crime reduction, it's all about focusing your efforts on 10% of that criminal element, not 10% of your population, but the criminal element. They're the ones creating the havoc in your community. So we put a concerted effort. We identify those folks in our community and we make sure they know that we're checking up on them and holding them accountable within the community. So that's just an overview of the detachment. And I'll just go through the statistics here, 2013 compared to 2014. And these are the number of reported crimes at the detachment. And like I say, this is within the boundaries of the city of Parksville. Assaults from 85 down to 68. Business break-and-enters from 31 to 32. Residential break-and-enters from 21 to 27. Theft of motor vehicle from 15 to 22, and I don't have the stats in front of me, but I can tell you the town of Qualicum Beach had an increase in theft from vehicles as well. We had throughout the summer, it doesn't take much for a crime group out of another community to come into our community and dump a stolen vehicle and steal another vehicle and carry on, and we certainly had a little bit of that this summer. Theft from motor vehicle from 131 down to 70. And for those returning members to council, it's quite familiar to hear me say I really lament about this stuff and keeping your vehicles locked and keeping objects out of plain sight in your vehicle. It's one of those crimes that's so preventable, and we can do something to minimize the opportunity for those criminals out there. So it looks like the community has done a good job in that regard. But don't give up. We need to keep our vehicles locked and hide those valuables. Thefts, in the criminal code, they're classified as theft over $5,000 and theft under. I combined them together there, from 188 to 217. Mischief, and we broke this down into when there's mischief against a business, or we call it other than residential, and then we break it down into residential. So business and other from 130 down to 107. And residential mischief from 45 down to 56. A lot of those numbers are tagging and graffiti. The town of Qualicum Beach went through a significant increase in graffiti this past year. Parksville didn't, but they did. It was related a lot to the elementary school and the little story village and that stuff. But cause of disturbance from 101 down to 88. Drugs, and that's a really broad category. That would be possession of drugs, trafficking drugs, production of drugs, those types of things, from 59 down to 52. Impaired driving from 4 down to 5. If you notice, in 2012, there were 17 impaired driving, and then a number decreased, and you'll see IRP 90-day fail. IRP is the provincial legislation that came in for immediate roadside prohibitions, where somebody fails a roadside screening device. That is immediate suspension of a license for 90 days, a vehicle impounded for 30 days, and there's a series of things that have to occur for that person to get their vehicle back and to get their license back. So that legislation has, as you may or may not have read in the news over the years, has saved hundreds of lives in our province. It's very, very effective in saving lives. So IRP 90-day fail went from 41 to 34, and IRP 90-day refuse, that's if somebody refuses roadside to provide a sample of their breath. It's the same penalty, from 9 down to 4. And Liquor Act offenses, which could be minor in possession of alcohol, consume in public, open liquor in motor vehicle, those types of things, from 86 down to 65. And our motor vehicle incidents, collisions and accidents went from 152 down to 140. And that would include collisions involving pedestrians as well within the community. We really want that number to keep on going down, and a lot of it this year had to do with awareness and education as well, that we, through our traffic initiatives, educating the public. Thank you.
Any questions from a member of council regarding the mayor's report from Staff Sergeant Hunter? Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks very much for the report. It looks good when we see the numbers going from 151, 152 down to 140. The question I'd like to ask is how you're making out with the people on cell phones and Blackberries and this type of thing. Distracted drivers. Have you been doing any surveillance on those people?
Thank you, Councillor Greer. Yes, indeed, and it's one of these things that really, I don't think it just frustrates me, it frustrates the public to see these people out there distracted and quite dangerous and deadly at times. And we run several campaigns throughout the year. We're very fortunate in this community as well, I should mention. We have Central Island, Vancouver Central Island Traffic Services posted out of my detachment as well. They don't report to me. It's a island district resource, but we're fortunate to have Highway Patrol in our community, and we quite often work with them on these safe driving campaigns, which would include distracted driving. But I still see lots of it out there, and it's very frustrating. Even as people drive by accident scenes and they got their electronic device out talking about it or taking photos, it's just like, really? That's the type of stuff that can cause these terrible collisions.
Yeah, I myself see much of it happening. Anyways, thanks very much for your report.
Councillor Oates.
Thank you for the report, and thank you for the background information before you gave the actual statistics. I wonder if you could give us a little bit more detail on the theft from motor vehicles. What I'm trying to drill down to is, are people going around and checking cars in people's driveways, or is this more related to shopping malls and commercial businesses? Where are these opportunities existing for people to break into vehicles? Or is it all over the place?
Thank you, Councillor Oates. It usually happens at night or the wee hours of the morning. And for example, we had a case in a 2-week period a couple of years ago in Parksville here, where 40 vehicles were hit in 2 nights. It's one of those crimes where approximately 40. I don't have the number here in front of me, but it's certainly one of those crimes where a group of folks can drive into your community and they'll just start going down the streets checking door handles, and if it's open, they're going in and checking for it. In fact, when I spoke, I forget which time last year at council here, we made a few arrests on these, and when we were interviewing the individual afterwards, he said exactly that. I just went down and checked, and if the door was unlocked, I went in and stole whatever I wanted, and I did not, and I was not going to smash any windows to steal stuff. It was just a crime of opportunity. The smashing of windows does happen, but that's usually if they see something juicy inside, like a notebook computer or expensive tools and that sort of stuff. But it's generally down the streets and in the driveways.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much, Staff Sergeant Hunter. There was an issue that came up last year down at the end of Turner Road, where kids were going down and camping out at the river bend. And I know that you and I worked together in the past down at the park. Do you have something similar that's going to happen this spring and summer when it starts to happen again with the youth?
Thanks, Councillor Powell. Definitely what we do is, in all areas of the city, if we have some quote-unquote problem areas where things like this are happening, that's where we'll conduct our enhanced enforcement, usually through foot patrols and that type of stuff, and certainly that was an area last year. You know, it's becoming a problem when couches and chairs and sleeping bags start showing up along the riverbank, and it's certainly something that we don't want. We certainly want people to enjoy the area, but not to sleep and party overnight. So, and we rely a lot on our relationship with the city. You guys receive communications quite often from people from the public and pass it on to us, and of course we rely on the public to provide that information of where these things are happening as well.
Councillor Patterson and then Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Staff Sergeant Hunter. You touched on some of the vandalism or tagging, graffiti, and that was in Qualicum Beach. Do you break down youth reporting in when you detail down into some of your reports?
So the question was, do we separate from adult and youth? We certainly could, for a particular crime type, look into that. We made an arrested 3 individuals, and this is not in the city of Parksville, but it was in the town of Qualicum Beach, and 2 of them were adults, and there was 1 young person in there, and the adult we had arrested previously for the same offense the last year. So I think it would be surprising. It's not all young kids doing this, and it's certainly very, very disappointing. I know for myself as a member of the community to see this senseless act on our buildings and structures within the community, and we really do rely on the community calling it in and covering that up as soon as possible to really prevent it from occurring further and keep our city clean.
Follow-up, Your Worship? And then just another type of question. Last week I had a call that I attribute to type of a fraud type call where someone said that they were from BC Hydro and that payments hadn't been made. And they said, well, maybe it was you've made it to a wrong account or anything. What type of item reporting would that fall under it? Would that be I considered it a fraud type thing, but is it a mischief or is it?
That would definitely be a fraud, and those occurrences are on the rise, and perhaps I can start reporting on those for the city to compare from year to year. We do have a community that can be vulnerable to some of these frauds that are happening out there.
Most definitely. I posted it, and another business replied that a lady had the same type of similar conversation, and she was out purchasing a prepaid Visa to pay this type of bill, which obviously wasn't accurate.
Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Staff Sergeant Hunter. My question was also related to the graffiti and the whether it be residential or more particularly in business and other within mischief. I'm just curious, since this is the number of incidences that are reported, in your opinion, are there many that are not reported? In my own, just based on traveling around town, it does seem that there is quite a lot of graffiti in the area, and it feels like there's more than there were a couple of years ago.
Thank you, Councillor Beal. Absolutely. I believe there's quite a few instances of graffiti that are not reported. Similar to other crimes like theft from vehicles and theft for example, there was some in the commercial area of town down in the industrial park, and when I talked to an individual on the street type of thing, and I said, well, did you report it? No, don't want to bother you guys. So I think there is some unreported smaller crimes that are happening out there, and although they would make the stats go up, I'm not concerned about that. I'm concerned about solving these crimes, and I really do encourage people to call in, because it might be that little piece of the puzzle that we're missing. And back to the Qualicum Beach, and I recognize I'm not in the town of Qualicum Beach here. That's one of the reasons their numbers went up as well. I really pushed in that committee. You got to report these things, and it certainly paid off. We were able to make 3 arrests there this summer. Thank
you for a very thorough presentation. I have two quick questions. In the last couple of weeks, I've talked to different folk who've called me about different situations, and there seems to be a consistent message that there's a fear by the citizens of retribution if they call up and say, I've seen somebody do this, or I believe somebody's doing that. And you and I have spoken about this. There should be no fear of retribution because people don't have to identify themselves, do they, when they call the police and report on something that they feel is a criminal activity or might be an illegal act?
Citizens can certainly report occurrences in the community anonymously, and Crime Stoppers is a fantastic venue for that, and their anonymity will remain throughout the entire investigation.
So because we do get complaints, so should we be referring them to the Crime Stoppers line then when they call? I mean, I haven't been doing that, but I will do that if I get those kinds of calls. Refer them to Crime Stoppers.
Well, they can certainly call the detachment and say that they want to remain anonymous, and if there's still a comfort factor that's not reached for them there, Crime Stoppers is an option for them.
My final question is the theft over and under 5,000. It's steadily, you talked a little bit about it, it's steadily climbing, 146, 188, 217. Is it, I guess, is there a why there, or is it just the way it is?
Well, it definitely is the way it is, and I don't have an answer as to why that is, and I can certainly peel into the onion in previous years as well, where we are at with those numbers, but I don't have a specific reason for that, no.
Thank you very much. Be safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
As I said earlier, we have three delegations this evening. The first delegation is the Vancouver Island Tribute Festival, and I hope I pronounce your name right. Is it Fred Judson? Is that right? Mr. Judson here? Welcome, Mr. Judson. Please come and take a seat, turn on the microphone, and you have the floor.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Fred Judson. I'm with the Vancouver Island Tribute Festival. Last year was our first year at doing the festival. It worked out very, very well. And I'm here to ask you again, as we did last year, for help with the convention center of the rent for it. Last year, from our records, we had people from Campbell River, Victoria, Vancouver, Seattle, the Okanagan, and Calgary. Our allotment of rooms at the Bayside was sold out for 3 consecutive days. We had to put people in the Quality Inn and some of the other, even the RV sites got some of the business for the people coming here. The restaurants were utilized. We've had some great turnouts when it came to people extending help and contributions, not only in money, but in other ways. For those that don't know what the festival is all about, it's not an Elvis festival like they have in Colwood. It's not like an Elvis festival they have in Penticton. We have this year 16 entertainers coming. These are all professional entertainers. These are all people that have won awards throughout the United States and Canada. Our furthest group that's coming this year is coming from Argentina. We are having some real professional hosts this year that are coming from some of the networks. They've joined us. Last year, we had 3 shows. This year, we're going to have 4. The first show was 3/4 of the way sold out before I stopped on a Friday night. I'll read my own notes here. The second show, the evening show, was 100% sold out. The gospel show in the morning was sold out, or half sold out in the beginning, and by the end of the day, it was sold out. This year, we're planning on a card parade of convertibles on the Saturday, if it's allowed, and this will have all the entertainers to drive through District 69. We did part of it last year, and it worked out very, very well. Some of the major sponsors from last year was the City of Parksville, of course, the Victoria and the Nanaimo casinos, Quality Foods, Parksville Chrysler, Westland Insurance, Coastal Insurance, TD Bank, the Lounge, the Beach, BQ News, Revax, Forest Group, and Lana McQuaid. They all equated to over $1,000 a piece coming to help the festival out. It was a super event held. After all the bills were paid, everything done, they had $5,504 left over, went to the Cancer Society, and all that money stays in District 69. This year, the same thing. All money raised when the bills are all paid will stay in District 69. To give you a little bit of information about the entertainers that we're going to have, we've got an Elvis, which is Ben Klein, coming out of the United States. We have Roy Orbison, the Judds, ABBA, Frank Sinatra, Patsy Cline, Alan Jackson, Michael Bublé, Everly Brothers, the Beatles, and Jeannie Frisky. And I've got a note here. Where it came from, I have noted, but we would really like the mayor, if he could, to do opening ceremonies. So, that's it. We're asking for a bit of a handout. Thank you.
Before I pass it on to council for questions, how much did we give you last year? Do you remember?
$1,000.
Okay, thank you. Questions from council? Councillor Greer, Councillor Oates? No? Okay.
Thanks very much for your presentation, Mr. Judson. It's good to hear that your event was successful, and it was good to hear that you cleared $5,000. I guess you're pretty well aware, though, that we have no jurisdiction over the PCC building as far as the rent goes, and you probably learned that last year. And it's very difficult for us to set a precedent in giving you money for this type of event, because there's people coming all the time for money, and it's hard to give somebody some money and one group money and another group no money. I would suggest that you certainly raise some money through the hotels and resorts, because apparently you're filling those places up for 3 days or 4 days, and I'm sure some of those people that come stay longer or come earlier. So anyways, as far as the rent goes, we can't do much about that. It's up to council, I guess, whether they want to support it financially, but it does set a precedent for every other group that comes to see us. Thanks.
Councillor Patterson.
I don't always agree with Councillor Greer, but from a personal standpoint, bigger isn't always better. And so you said that you made $5,504 that went to the Canadian Cancer Society, which I fully support. I've done events in the past for Cops for Cancer, and a one-day event, we were able to bring in over $4,000 on just one evening. So it's not necessarily a suggestion when you have 16 entertainers, but you're probably dishing out a lot of money for your entertainment factor. I'm not sure if they're all volunteers or not, but okay, I'm getting nods in the audience, so which I think is fabulous. People come together. I'm just not sure how you weren't able to raise more money when you said that you had quite a few $1,000 donations from some of the different groups. So I'm not sure if that's a question that you can answer or not.
Thank you. All the entertainers that are coming are of their own. We're picking up the bill for their rooms and their food and their travel. Some of these entertainers are $1,200 to $1,500 a night, and they're coming here free gratis to do it. Because all of us, I don't care who it is in this room or what have you, has been touched by cancer. So it is a great thing. And we have an opportunity here for Parksville to turn around and be a big, major weekend. If you take a look at what Cowichan Valley's doing, they have a Western theme down there that started years ago, and it's doing very well. We ourselves that are involved in it right now are working on a 5-year plan. Once the 5 years up, this should be self-supporting 100%. It's becoming a huge thing. Ladysmith, 20,000 people there on one night to do their light up. You know, there's a lot of money. Parksville has the same thing, because you come to Parksville once, you're going to come back a second time. There's no question about that. So this is going to benefit us all. So we need in the first 5 years some help. And you're saying what happened to the money that we made? It was the first year, the startup cost. And believe me, it's humongous. It really is. So we've got stuff left over from last year that we can put in. But the more money we make goes to the Cancer Society. The more money for Cancer Society, the better off we all are going to be eventually.
Thank you. Councillor Oates.
Thank you, Your Worship. So if I understand correctly, your request to council is for us to, the material we got said that you want us to waive the fee, but I guess what you really want us to do is to pay the fee for the 3 nights at the convention center?
Well, that would be nice, but $1,000 like we had last year will be fine.
Because 3 nights, what I understand for 3 nights, I made some inquiries today. For the 3 nights there, the cost to your organization, GST included, is $1,921.50.
That's correct.
So I find it difficult, and I find it, you know, I'm sort of with Councillor Greer on this, sitting here and having to make a decision on what is obviously a very worthy cause. There's no doubt about it. There's nobody can talk about the validity of the cause of any sort of any sort of organization that works to raise money for the cancer. I also see a positive in the fact that you're using our facility for 3 nights and you're bringing people into the town. And I couldn't agree with you more that when people come here, they only need to see it once and they'll come back again. So for all of those reasons, I think it's great that this sort of event is happening here in our town, and I wish you much success. When this is all over, I'd be prepared to make a motion to move this, to refer this to budget deliberations for further consideration by council, but I don't think I'm prepared to support the request tonight. However, I do believe that what you're doing is a very worthy cause on 2 fronts, on 3 fronts. I believe that the Tribute Festival, that this idea, I think, is a good idea. I think it's something that will gain traction. I think this event will grow. This idea, this notion of tribute bands is something that's that is getting traction. There's lots of them across the, well, internationally for different bands. Perhaps some bands that weren't in the 50s originally might be something might be worth considering. But I think it's a worthy cause, and but I don't know how we can set the precedent, as Mr. Greer said earlier, for these different organizations. If we are unable to find our way to provide you the financial request that you ask, will your event fail?
No, one way or another, it's going to go ahead. I own a bus company in town, and I have made this commitment for 5 years. One way or another, the bills will be paid either by the festival or by myself. One way or another. This is, as my family has been hit huge by cancer, and we will make this happen.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you very much for your presentation. I remember when you came last year, and one of the things that tipped it for me was that it was an off-season event where the convention center was the community center, pardon me, wasn't fully utilized. And I think that the $1,000 was a small price because we talked about the economic development it was bringing into the city. And because it is an off-season event, we could count on that piece. You're asking for $1,000, not $2,000 tonight?
That's correct.
And you also, we have a fund that, what's that fund called through you to the CAO for the council? Contingency fund. We do have a contingency fund, and I understand Councillor Greer's frustration because we don't really have a policy around how we give those dollars out. And unfortunately, you sort of come when we should be having that discussion. And so I would support it personally because I think it's a good event and I think it's for a good cause, and we do have the contingency fund, and I don't think it's fair that you should be stuck in the gray area because we haven't developed a policy.
Councillor Greer, follow up.
Thank you, Worship. Mr. Judson, I was wondering, you said that these bands come, or these entertainers come for nothing, but they're coming from the States and you're paying their travel, you're paying for their hotels, you're paying for their food. That in itself is a huge amount of money. And I was wondering, if nothing else, maybe you could book these people into the hotels for nothing. And I've done that in the past with some entertainers that I've brought into town. But I think, you're spending a tremendous amount of money even though they're coming for nothing. What is your budget to bring these people in? There's quite a number of them.
Now, the budget, I'd have to go to the bookkeeper for that one. But I know the hotels already are giving reduced rates, hugely reduced rates. And they'll also throwing in some extra rooms, their rooms, so that we can have the entertainers enjoy an after party, if you want to call it, but it's a get-together that the entertainers have not seen each other for some time because they're always on the road. So
it'd be just nice to know that, what that costs, because that's probably a huge part of the cost other than the rental of the building.
Yes, it's a fair amount, but
these people are flying in, are they? And
some are flying in, some are driving in. The ones from the mainland and on the island, the Judds, like from Victoria, they're going to drive up, and they are only here for the number of days that they perform. So if they're performing on a Friday, they get one night, then that room gets turned over the next day to the next entertainer. But we have the Bayside, and they have given us a tremendous break in the cost of the rooms. And I believe if you're an entertainer, most of the meals are supplied by the restaurants. If you're an entertainer and you tell them that you are so-and-so, most of the restaurants are coming to the party on that one.
I think it would help us make a decision if we could see your financial statements. So I don't know whether we'll make a decision tonight, but Councillor Oates says we should wait and see where this money's coming from and have a discussion on it. So maybe in the meantime, if you could send us a financial statement, we'd like to look at that. Thank you.
Yes,
Councillor, I just want to remind everybody we're talking about $1,000 here. So, Councillor Oates.
Okay, so you got me a rebuttal questions. Now you got my interest. So if council were to, say, pass a motion tonight to contribute $1,000 to this, how would we be recognized for that $1,000 contribution?
The only thing I didn't bring was this. Last year, because you were one of the major contributors, just like the other ones that I mentioned, on the sheets that go out, the town of Parksville, city of Parksville, pardon me, goes on there with your logo into every store and anybody that wants a flyer. And we'll probably put out about 3,000 of these flyers. We're printing them in my office. They come out, and your City of Parksville's name and the logo go on here. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think certificate was issued last year stating the thank yous from the festival and from the Cancer Society. And as a matter of fact, the Cancer Society head office is sending up a rep from Victoria this year to help out with it.
Councillor Patterson, quickly, please. I'm sorry. No, Councillor, she was first.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Could you just tell me what day the festival occurred last year? Is it on your flyer that you have, or is that this year's flyer?
No, this is this year's flyer, and it's the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. It was around the same time. It's 1 week after the long weekend, so that we're not interfering with all the other recreations that's going on at the lunch. So we always picked it, and this is going to happen every year for 5 years. By that time, I'll be 73 years old, and I'm out of here.
Oh, no, you're way young. You've got lots of years left.
Last question, Councillor Beale. We're going to wrap this up.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Judson. I just wanted to support Councillor Oates' suggestion that this decision be deferred to when we're discussing the budget. I think it's important to consider this in the larger context of other requests and the realities that we face this year. But it certainly does sound like a very entertaining event, so well done.
Well, for $99, you can come all weekend.
Thank you very much, Mr. Judson. And last year it was a great event. It was the first time, and it was a roaring success. And what I can't believe is how we got to give you the $1,000 with Councillor Greer sitting at the table. I guess we did set a precedent.
I voted against it.
You did, yeah. Well, I wouldn't be surprised, but however we did. Councillor Oates, do you want to make a motion tonight?
Can I ask one very brief question?
Very brief.
How time sensitive is the request?
When the city like their bill paid.
I'd like to move that this request for a $1,000 donation to the Vancouver Island Tribute Festival be referred to budget deliberations.
I have a second. Okay. All those in favor? Thank you very much again, and congratulations on a great event that brings a lot of people to Parksville, and it's got a great economic ripple effect. Thank you.
Thank you very much for y'all.
Next, we have on the agenda the Mid-Vancouver Island Habitat Enhancement Society, a great organization. We've got Faye Smith and Peter Law, and someday, Faye, you're going to have to give some consideration to shortening the name, because it's MVIHES. It doesn't really roll off
I know
your
it
lips.
doesn't, and you can't shorten it anyway that makes any sense. We've tried. Well, thank you, Your Worship and Council, and you've already introduced us, so I don't need to say anything who we are, but we're very happy to be here tonight. Although we connect people to their landscape, partnerships, shorelines, estuaries. In the last few years, our focus has been mainly on the Englishman River watershed. And tonight we're going to be talking about Shelley Creek. Oops, I got the wrong one here. There's a map of Shelley Creek. And it's an RDN map, so I'm not making a lot of noise here. Where you see the dots, that's RDN. And so this creek winds in and out of Parksville in the regional district, going from up in Arrington, flowing all the way down to the Englishman River, where it enters just above the Orange Bridge. You see the arrow that goes from that side to the corner over there. That's roughly the area that we're concerned with at the moment. It's the lower end of Shelley Creek. Next. So we're here tonight to tell you about some of the issues that we found are happening on Shelley Creek. This is a picture of us doing some minnow trapping a while ago. And to tell you how we believe that the city can partner with us to start to restore the creek. We've been sampling the water in the Englishman River watershed, including Shelley Creek, with the RDN for the past 4 years. Shelley Creek, unfortunately, is showing the worst water quality for turbidity in the entire regional district. Turbidity is a scientific term for sediment-laden water, usually caused by high-flowing streams eroding their banks. On the other hand, the good news is Lower Shelley Creek is proving to be an important area for, especially for coho juveniles to rear. They get fat there and strong before they enter the ocean. And in the monitoring that we've been doing in the last 3 or 4 years, we're getting numbers of coho juveniles over 8,000. And so this area, which is down where we monitor on Martindale Road, is an extremely important rearing area for this important fish and salmon. So it's these are the things that set us off to really start to focus on Shelley Creek. I'm going to let Pete talk a little bit here about the water. Go.
Thanks, Faye. So this is where it really gets technical. It's okay. What we're going to do is, as Faye has pointed out, we've got some concerns with the sediment, high levels of sediment in the stream, and we've also got concerns with large numbers of coho in the lower end of the stream. So we thought to ourselves, what are we going to do about this? We decided last summer to initiate a stream survey. We looked into our files, and 15 years ago, we found information that a stream survey had been done. So what we did was we followed the same methodology that had been done 15 years ago in 1999, and we followed it so that we could compare apples to apples. So we went from Blower Road all the way up to Wild Green Way, roughly 500 meters. And what I'd like to do is just kind of give you a quick summary of what we found. So if you compare 1999 to 2014 data, I'm going to try and give you a quick sense of what a stream is composed of. It's composed of a riparian area, those are the trees on either side, and the stream channel. That channel, as it flows downstream, actually creates a kind of condition which, of course, is amenable to fish, and that's what we call fish habitat. Those are the pools and riffles. So what we did is comparing those two, or the 2 years, I'm going to just take a look at 3 primary issues. One of them was by comparing the number of pools and the condition of the pools between 2014 and 1999, we saw a negative impact. Basically, 50% of the pools in Shelley Creek, in the portion of the stream that we looked at, were actually gone. They are now filled in with sediment. The riparian condition was good. That's the streamside vegetation on either side. We're actually very, very good in that respect. Then there's the channel condition. The channel condition is the substrates, the rocks and the gravel and stream banks. Heavy erosion on the stream channel is what we found. So we also found that in 1999, the entire stretch of this stream had resident trout in it. In 2014, we saw 2. So in August, we hired a geomorphologist. Geomorphologist is a specialist in streamside conditions and stream related fluvial conditions, and we asked them to take a look and we hired NHC out of Nanaimo to take a look, and they gave us about an assessment from basically Martindale Road all the way up to Wild Green Way. Their information basically corroborated what we had seen, that erosion has occurred in a significant area of this stream, and that his best guess was the reason for the high levels of erosion were associated with land development issues that had occurred over the past 15 years in association with residential development in the watershed. A couple of quick pictures. This is the kind of condition the stream banks are in, basically clay, erosion all the way through the system. We're also seeing high levels of sediment being transported around through the system, filling up pools. We also found, and this is of significant interest to the city, in various road culverts through the lower portion of the river, a lot of sediment now impacting the stream culvert conditions, specifically Butler Road, Hamilton Road, and of course the major issue has been Blower Road. So, what is Mid-Vancouver Island Habitat Enhancement Stewards doing? We have applied to the Department of Fisheries and Oceans to see if we could initiate some projects to stabilize this small stream. And in December, we found out that we were successful. So we are now in the process of putting plans together for trying to stabilize various portions of the lower end of the stream. So the question the reason we came here tonight was to ask that the city, what can the city of Parksville do for us? Well, really we've identified three main items. One is become partners with us in the restoration activities associated with Shelley Creek. In particular, we'd like to begin by asking that the city allow your engineering staff assist us in our efforts to plan and restore portions of the stream over the next 2 years. The next 2 years are the funding window that we have with DFO. We also, this next bullet down, is that we'd like to ask that the city's engineering department place a high priority on the review of stormwater management practices in the Shelley watershed. The investigation by our geomorphologist seems to point to erosion in the lower portions of Shelley Creek as a result of drainage discharge from residential development that's occurred over the past 15 to 20 years. So now this is a lot of information to pick up in a short, hopefully 10-minute presentation. So what we are actually offering to council and staff as an opportunity to come with us for a tour of the Shelley watershed sometime this spring. We'll get the bus.
Thank you, Peter,
Thanks.
and thank you, Faye. It's my understanding that, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Figueroa, I believe that staff are aware of this situation and are working with the Mid-Vancouver Island Habitat Enhancement Society. I had a brief discussion with Mr. Squire because of the implications that it flows into the Englishman River. I gather we'll be doing that. So the becoming partners in this restoration is a foregone conclusion. Am I correct in that?
If I may, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. We've been working, had some meetings with Faye already, and basically from our standpoint, we've been discussing mainly Blower Road and the culvert that was mentioned, and we have provided a letter to Faye of support from the Engineering and Operations Group to look at replacing the culvert on Blower Road with perhaps a box concrete culvert with fish baffles. So we're definitely working with Faye, and we'll continue to do that. We really feel she has with us a lot of credibility. She hires the right people, and we're definitely willing to work with her, and we'll continue to work with her.
Thank you. And before I turn it over to members of council, Faye and Peter, I really appreciate the work that you do. Faye and I met earlier this last week, I guess, and we spoke for quite some time about this issue. And as the mayor, I'm certainly going to accept your offer. Perhaps I think for members of council at work, Saturday might be a better day of the week in terms of organizing that. But I'll leave that up to the rest of council. Questions from council? Councillor Group.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks, Peter and Faye, for your interesting presentation. You're doing some great work, and it's great to see that type of work is being done. I was wondering, and going along with the mayor, Saturday would be good. I'm away all of March, and I'd like to be on that tour.
Great.
So
we'll arrange it around your time.
And also the mayor, I think, is away quite a bit too, maybe in April and March. No?
Oh, herding cats again.
Anyways, I was wondering, you made a presentation to the RDN?
That was one of the things I was going to mention. And yes, we will be, because of course it's not just Parksville's
How many actual
problem here.
miles? Do you have any idea of where the river runs through our property?
Not, well, off and on. It's, let's see, 400, 600, I don't know, probably kilometer, yeah, something like that. And a lot more is RDN, but
yes.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's good, and if we can help,
Yeah,
I'm sure we will.
Sure. No problem. They're in with us.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you very much, Faye. I really admire the work that you've done in the different rivers that you've built back up for habitat. I, too, would really like to go on a tour, and I hope we do it in March when Al's not here. I'm just bugging you, Al. Of course I want you to come. What was I going to say? Is there a way, I'm not sure if this would be possible, but one of the things, we've done this in the past where we've agreed to support through staff to work with you about different projects you're on. Is there a way that we can have a report back or the progress and anything that's happening and how that's going? That's through the mayor to Mr. Figuera.
If I may, Your Worship,
sure.
Through to Councillor Powell, absolutely. Yeah, we can report back on things like we just discussed today, Blower Road, see how that's going. And right now we're working on trying to get some cost estimates. And of course, if it's going to be a fairly significant cost that we're talking about, we'll come back to you before if we commit. But we want to make sure we get all the costs down right. And if it's something that we can work with in our operational budget in terms of replacing a culvert, then we suggest that we just go ahead with that. But if it's going to be a more significant involvement, then we'll come back to you.
Councillor Beale, and then Councillor Oates, and then Councillor Patterson.
And I, too, would like to add my thanks to you, Faye, and to Peter, and for the great presentation. I've seen it twice now and have enjoyed it both times. Yes, April 11th is not good for me and also not good for some of the other members here. So, and I, too, would very much like to go on the tour. So thank you.
All right.
And, I think Councillor Powell should consider the opportunities that exist to having Councillor Greer walking along by a slippery riverbank, but so perhaps she might want to reconsider his attendance. I want to ask a question. You mentioned there was some issue about the coho salmon. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Too many, yeah, really. No, we, our group decided that we wanted to do some fish monitoring, and of course Shelley Creek is urban stream, and so we built a trap and set up a fence, and over a period of 3 years, volunteers went out every morning from about the middle of April till the middle of May. I think the first year wasn't quite that long, but in any case, the volunteers would release the fish every morning after measuring and sometimes weighing and identifying the species. So so we found that 99% of the fish trapped were coho smolts, and that's the juveniles. And so the last year that we had the fence set up was year before last, and that year we caught over 8,000 fish, 8,100 something. It was 7,000 something, almost that many the year before. And so, you know, we're looking at a major area here for rearing fish. Also, this year we didn't place, or last 2014 didn't place the fence and trap in. First of all, we'd had 3 years for a trend, but also the water was too high, possibly a beaver dam downstream or something like that. So we didn't get it in, but in February we had done the minnow trapping. We had a picture of the team there, and we were catching fry in there, coho fry. So there's a lot of valuable habitat, and our problem is that with so much sediment coming down from the upper watershed, that area, which you know, you're all probably familiar with the turtle sitting there, and it's kind of marshy and ponds all over the place. It's at risk of filling in. It's already getting kind of iffy. So what we're hoping to do with this phase anyway of the restoration is to take the most obvious spots where we can work, and that's what our biologists and the geomorphologists have helped us with. And I should point out that the funding from DFO, which is Recreational Fisheries Community Partnership, is only pays for improving fish habitat. So some of the, you know, awareness things that need to be done and issues like this, and other activities that are certainly important, we have to do with our matching funding. And so we have some matching funding, and some we're still just applying for, and the Pacific Salmon Foundation and Ministry of Transportation, things like that. So, and the RDN too, I should say, and they've already committed some funding and some time. So,
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Faye. It's always a pleasure, and Mr. Law, for your presentation. I think that a lot of our community doesn't realize how much good work that you do, so I just wanted to thank you again. When one of your maps, it showed that, well, Shelley Creek kind of moves quite a bit, and that one arrow type figure slide that you showed. So you talked a little bit about residential and some of the compromises and everything that happened by having some of this development. Now, Shelley Creek's in a lot of the RDN area as well. So do you know how much of that area is in like ALR type land, or do you foresee that there's potential for a great deal of residential development or anything coming forward that could affect?
Well, like we said, our focus right now has been kind of on the lower end, and although you know, around Wild Green and that, there's you know, more development happening. The lower end is more established now, and I'm not sure. We're going to continue our assessment this summer by going further up, like through along Allsbrook and I guess the cemetery and all of that. So we'll have a better idea of you know, land use and where there may be more problems than we're aware of right now. But yeah, some of it is ALR land and in the lower area.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. I think you can probably count on the month of April to organize that tour and give us some advance notice so that we can set it up and meet the bus.
On a Saturday and not the 11th. And okay. we look forward to that.
I can't thank you enough for what you do. You're a great asset to our community.
Anybody who wants to join us is certainly welcome, and it's fun to get you outside.
Rain or shine. Okay, the final presentation is the Island Crisis Care Society, and we have Violet Hayes and Sarah Poole. So, ladies, you've got something for us. Great. Okay, please proceed, and you've got 10 minutes.
Oh, I have to turn it on. Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. I'm going to start by giving you a little bit of history of Island Crisis Care Society, just so you know who we are. In the early 80s in Nanaimo, there was a need for a shelter. There was nowhere for people to stay, and so a group of individuals got together and decided that they would rent a house down on Nickel Street, and so they did that, called it Samaritan House, and it's been operating ever since the early 80s as a homeless shelter. In 2007, the Salvation Army in Nanaimo opened up the New Hope Centre, which I'm sure you're all aware of, and so at that time they took the men, and then we changed over from taking men and women to just being the women's shelter. The society continued to grow, and in 2001, Crescent House was started, which is a crisis stabilization house. What that means is that we have a contract with VHA, and we provide housing and support to people that have had a crisis. Maybe that they've had a psychiatric break, and so they've just been released from the psychiatric ward. It could be that they have a problem with addictions and they're waiting to get in for treatment. Anything like that, they might end up at our place, and we'll try and care for them. In 2003, we did the similar thing in Parksville, and so we've had Hearst House operating in Parksville since 2003. And some of you might remember that we had our 10th anniversary a couple of years ago now. And so just about a year and a half ago, I joined the Task Force on Homelessness here in Parksville. And that's when I met Sarah, and she had just been hired at that point. And so we just have really been working on what can we do. There is a big issue here, not huge, but there is a concerted issue with people that need a safe and clean place to live. So we've been working together, and some of you I know slept out in the park with the previous mayor as well. We slept out, and that was a great thing. And I just want to say how positive it's been working here in this group, and I've really enjoyed getting to know some of you, and we're really excited about some of the things that we're hoping to do. And Sarah's going to tell you a bit more about the task force.
So, as if many of you know, the task force started as a directive from a previous mayor when homelessness was just starting to be recognized in an issue in the Oceanside area. And now it has developed to the point where we have local and regional political representation, and we have leadership representation from many of the social services around the community, in addition to people with experience in other communities that have retired here, and they have wanted to find ways to get involved. So it's a very robust task force. And the changes and the progress that it has made over the last few years has been really quite incredible. So in 2011, they did their first homelessness point-in-time count and followed that up again in 2013. They found fairly stable numbers. They had about 67 individuals identified as being homeless or at risk of homelessness. Keeping in mind with a point-in-time count, they are very low estimates because you're dependent upon people trusting to come forward on that specific time and day and willing to identify themselves as homeless, but it gives us a really good working start. In 2014, in the spring, I finished a needs assessment for the task force, and I'm happy to share that report with anybody. But for today, because that was pretty extensive, I wanted to just focus on housing because I am here with Violet and Island Crisis Care. So with housing, we have had a extreme weather shelter open in the Parksville area over the last 4 years. It's been run in conjunction with the SOS and the Salvation Army, one maintaining the call if the weather is bad enough. So with the extreme weather shelter, the criteria is -2, so it has to be maintain a temperature of -2 or colder, persistent snow on the ground, or make it the winds or what have you, make it impossible to stay dry. So it's a pretty narrow scope of conditions that allow that shelter to stay open. And as a result, if it's only open for 1 or 2 nights, the numbers can be somewhat low. But when it's open for an extended period of time, those numbers build up. And this winter, they've already been past capacity on 1 night. So it's getting recognition in the community that it's there and it's available, and people are accessing it. And it's showing the need that we need to look for more solutions. So last year we applied for HPS funding with Island Crisis Care. So that all across Canada, they're shifting to a new focus, and that's looking at ways to end homelessness. And so we applied for funding to try to put that into practice in our own community. So we developed a Housing First team. So we have representation from a number of societies, as well as Island Health, coming together to address people that fit our criteria of chronic and episodically homeless, trying to figure out not whether or not they deserve to be housed, but what support systems those individuals need in order to maintain their housing. And we also are able to provide them with rental subsidies and money to actually make sure the places are furnished so that they're really moving into their own home. And so far, we've been very successful. We only received this money to be able to house our first people in December. And we've now housed 2 individuals. I've just secured a 3rd landlord who's willing to work with us. And one of the original landlords has already called us and said this is working so well that when he has another unit available, he'd like to work with us again, and we can house another person. So when you're looking at housing some of our most vulnerable people in the community, and that's the feedback that we're getting from the landlords, what we're doing, I think, is working. It's on a very small scale, but it's definitely working. With the reputation of the SOS and the strides that the task force has made over the last couple of years, BC Housing has just signed a contract with the SOS to provide us with 5 more rental subsidies and a part-time outreach worker. So this is some more movement that would not have happened if it wasn't for the involvement of the task force. And I think, the collaboration that exists is really unique to this task force, and I think this is a great opportunity for Parksville and the Oceanside area to look for more ways to move forward. And when we see how, by supporting the strongest society that we have to move forward and look at additional ways to find housing and find ways to bring in affordable housing into our community, I think it's something we need to seriously consider.
Thank you. So one thing that we've really seen as we've been working on the task force is the need for a shelter. The emergency shelter where we can bring people initially so that we can kind of stabilize them and just see, what their needs are so that we can best find them permanent housing. We don't want it to be a prerequisite that they have to be sober or that they have to have some sort of psychiatric treatment. The Housing First principle that we're working with is that we accept them as they are and then give them that hope that they can have a successful place, a home. And just as Sarah shared, it's been so exciting because we have these two individuals now that have just been housed. And wow, it's just been so neat to see their face when they walk in and realize that after 8 years of not having a home, this is now their home. And as they try and make those decisions around, a couch or a bed, if you haven't seen someone who you might think it's flippant, so, well, why can't you make a decision? But when you haven't had to do that, it's so amazing to see, and we're seeing that success right now. So anyway, what happened was the building next door to the SOS came up for sale, and so then there was great excitement. Oh, wow, what could this mean for us? And so PDACL has recently purchased that building, but they purchased it with kind of an agreement with us that we would try and rent half of that building from them, and so that we could provide a shelter. We're not thinking only shelter, though. We're thinking that there needs to be so much more. In order to support these individuals, they need to have that support around them. So the shelter is the initial stage. The next step is some singular occupancy rooms, or it could be a transitional piece where they could stay. And then so much more of the support's coming in. We've had interest from several agencies who would like to come and set up kind of a little office in there, including Island Health, some GPs, some foot care nurses, and some hairdressers who want to be able to come in and provide support for these individuals. So what do we need from the city? Well, the building is zoned P1 as a community care facility, and so therefore we need to know whether we need rezoning in order to have it for this use. So that's the first thing that we need to know. And then we would hope for a letter of support from the city. We have to go to BC Housing with a business plan and say, yes, this is something that we can do. But BC Housing has said that, the support of the city and the town of Qualicum are things that they're going to really look at, as well as support of Island Health. So, if we can have you agreeing that this is something that you want to see in your city, then that would go a long way. So next steps, we have community awareness, which we're really working on, and part of it is the coldest night of the year, where we get to wear these amazing toques. So we've done it, this will be our 4th year in Nanaimo for Island Crisis Care, and so now we're bringing it to Oceanside because we really feel that the time is ripe for, explaining to the community the need that is there, and just bringing everyone together. So we're going to show you the video, and that will be that. We'll be finished.
So here's the plan, Canada. Grab your calendar and circle this date. Saturday, February 21st. That's the day we're all going to walk in the coldest night of the year. Why? Because homelessness is a big problem in our country. And not just somewhere else, it's on your street right now. It's a grinding, life-draining, stomach-churning, anxiety-inducing, day-to-day living on the edge type of poverty that can suddenly grip anyone. Youth, elderly, families, entire neighborhoods. And stats don't lie. Chances are it's affected someone you know, a friend, your brother, even you. The coldest night of the year is our response. It's you and I and all our friends walking together on a cold winter's night, raising money for dozens of remarkable charities across Canada who faithfully serve the hungry, homeless, and hurting right here in our towns. No, seriously, the walk is in your town or very close by. We're talking Vancouver Island, across the BC interior to Alberta, Saskatchewan, up to Northwest Territories, back down through Manitoba, skipping around tons of locations in Ontario, hopping over to Quebec to our friends in New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, PEI, all the way to Newfoundland and Labrador. Across the country, tens of thousands of people are coming together and filling the streets, despite the cold, because of the cold, to show they care. That's what makes it Canada's largest national walk for homelessness. So you should walk with us. We need each other, and we need you. Start a team. Join with some friends. Give. Volunteer. Feel that cold Canadian night in a new way. and start warming it up. Join us on February 21st, and remember, it's cold out there.
So what we do need someone to do that is walking is to go online and register the city team so that people can see that the City of Parksville is walking, and then if you want to sponsor Councillor Greer, then you can, because you can go online and do it and get your tax receipt right away. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all you do. This is, this didn't exist a few years ago, and when Sarah arrived and people like yourself working together, it's really amazing for what you do for those who aren't as fortunate in our society. Questions from council? I'm going to go this way this time. Councillor Oates, Mary, no? Councillor Powell,
Well,
Councillor
thank
Greer.
you for advocating for the most vulnerable in our society. It's a very noble cause. The extreme weather station that you said one night this winter was over capacity. What is the capacity of the extreme weather station, and what is the hope for capacity? And then I have another question.
It is, they have 8 beds out of the Salvation Army church there on the corner of the Port Alberni Highway, so that is their capacity. But it was actually New Year's Eve that they had a 9th person show up, and thankfully they just didn't turn that person away.
You asked for, or I think Violet asked for, a letter of support from the city. What does that mean?
I think BC Housing is just looking for the city to be, believing in what we're trying to do. Of course, a lot of times NIMBYism comes in, and so, that's the hope, is that that won't happen, that there will be support from the council.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you very much for your presentation. I can't tell you how happy I am to see the leaps and bounds you guys have made. Like, it's been a hard road. Just through you, the Mayor, to the Director of Engineering, the P1 to rezone, do they have to rezone it for the use that they have it for?
Hi. If I make Your Worship through to Councillor Powell. The P1 zone, I don't have the whole bylaw memorized in my head, but my recollection is that it has to be a licensed facility under the Community Care Facilities Act to be permissible in the P1 zone. That's my understanding.
And so, are you going to be a care facility at some level?
No, I wouldn't think so. Most municipalities, from my understanding, I think have a shelter designation, but I don't think you have one here. Okay. So, yeah.
Councillor Greer?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Violet and Sarah, for a good presentation. I'm excited about this, and that's why I took the job on of raising some money. I'm not doing it really on behalf of the city here, but I did choose to go to my old-timers hockey guys, and I got quite a number of them, and our aim was to raise maybe $2,500. And so far, I think we're close to 2,000 in just a little over a week. Couple of questions I'd ask. I'm taking the money, a lot of it's in cash, some of it's made out checks to Cold as Night Oceanside. So when I get it all together, I will, the cash I will give it to our organization, and they'll cut you one check for all of these people. But I have made a list of all of the people, their addresses. Do you need their emails?
Yes, we do. The coldest night of the year, they will email all of the tax receipts. Okay. So if it's a $20 or more and they want a tax receipt, yes.
That's more work you give me, because I haven't got their email. But anyway,
oh dear.
I will get their emails.
Now, if you don't have their email, they can mail them. It just takes longer. And
I'll get as many emails as I can, and I'll have that for you. Yeah, I think we're doing pretty good. The guys have been pretty willing. Everybody's on board. So it's a good project.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question through to the CAO. We don't have a shelter designation that I'm aware of. What are the next steps that this group will need to go through for rezoning? Just to let them know. well?
They would have to make an application to council.
My suggestion was going to be, listening to the presentation, was that you define what you're doing in very clear terms, and then write to me, send it off to me, or send it off to the Director of Community Planning or yourself.
If I may, Your Worship, as with any rezoning, it would go to planning. It would simply be a regular application as any other application. It would be then vetted by staff and brought to council for their consideration.
So if I'm not mistaken, then you would define what you're doing, get a hold of the Director of Community Planning or somebody on his staff, and they'll give you the application forms and go from there.
Okay.
Great. Okay. Yes, Ms. Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much for the presentation. It's really very heartwarming. And I guess I'm just wondering if perhaps we could have some specific information that would be needed in order to provide a letter of support. I'm just wondering if it's the support is for a particular project, if there's a particular title. So I'm just thinking about those kinds of details that can often help in a letter of support.
Yeah, we can definitely provide that, because there's other community agencies and networks that are willing to write letters of support, and I'll be doing the same thing for all of them to let them know the more specific details so that you can make up a specific letter of support.
Councillor Greer, follow-up.
Just one quick question. There was a meal involved after the walk, I understand, and that's at Knox Church, where they're starting and finishing there. I see, because that was a big selling point for these old guys. They're going to get something for their money.
Yes, we need to have lots and lots of walkers, so try and get more people walking. And Woodwind School is actually going to cook the chili for us. So, yeah.
Well, thank you once again, and I would invite you over the next 4 years to come back on a regular basis and give us an update on what you're doing and how things are going, because it affects us all. It's all an integral part of our community. Thanks again. I can't thank you enough. Thank you. One very quick question.
I'm just wondering if we need to make a motion to write a letter of support for... Do we need to do that? Or is it...
CEO?
If I may, Your Worship, to be absolutely formally correct, the answer would be yes. But I think, as you have in the past, you have written letters of support on your own recognizance. So either way.
Okay, thank you. Thank you once again. Are you leaving, Councillor Greer, or are you coming back? All right. You want to vote on the $1,000 giving it to the organization? Okay, well, all kidding aside, without Councillor Greer, I don't think he won't miss very much. We're moving on to the reports, item 5A, and it's up to the mayor to give the background on this issue regarding the mayor's city vision, not the mayor's, but the city vision, mission, and corporate value statements. And we worked on this as council. I believe most of council was there. This would have been done on January the 23rd. I believe it was a Friday. We spent several hours going over the existing city vision, mission, and corporate statements. And we went through it with a fine-tooth comb. I thought we went by item almost line by line and asked for input and comments. And there were, I would have to say, minimal comments that were made that made changes. Everybody seemed to ascribe to what was being proposed. So I guess I'll read the recommendations first. So the first recommendation is regarding the city vision, mission, and corporate value statements is that the report from Mayor Lefebvre dated January 23rd, 2015, entitled City Vision, Mission, and Corporate Value Statements be received. Do I have a motion for that and a seconder? All those in favor? The second item is that council adopt the vision, mission, and corporate value statements as outlined on Schedule 1 of this report. I have a mover and seconder for that. Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Beale. Any comments, additions, deletions? All those in favor? Thank you very much. The next issue is the Council's strategic priorities, and once again, my comments are the same. We went through this document item by item, line by line, and spent some time discussing a lot of these issues that we face in the future. And again, I'll read the recommendation. Recommendation number 1 on item 5B, that the report from Mayor Lefebvre dated January 23rd, 2015, entitled 2015 Strategic Priorities, be received. Do I have a mover and seconder? Councillor Beale, Councillor Powell, seconded. Any comments? All those in favor? Thank you. And then the second item, that Council adopt the strategic priorities as outlined on Schedule 1 of the Mayor's 2015 Strategic Priorities Report. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Beale. Comments, observations? Councillor Oates. You're correct on that. Yeah. Actually, the downtown core is very well defined. It goes from McVickers to McMillan, and it goes from Jensen to the Island Highway. So, you're welcome. Okay. So I'll call the vote. We have a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? Thank you. That is unanimous. Okay, so we're now on item 5C, and this is from the Fire Chief, Chief Banks. Would you please give us a background on the issue regarding confined space rescue agreement with the RDN?
Thank you, Your Worship. The purpose of this report is for Council's approval to sign an agreement with the Regional District of Nanaimo, their utilities department, to provide confined space rescue in order that they can meet their WorkSafe BC requirements.
Thank you. Once again, I'm going to be calling for a mover and a seconder for the two recommendations that you have before you. Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Any comments, any questions, any observations? Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the Fire Chief. So it says on page 39, number 6, provide PVFD with an emergency contact list of RDN personnel. And then I want to know if we're going to have, is it going to be volunteer or paid staff that will be helping out with the WCB standards?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Powell, the chief officers will be looking after meeting all the standards, and that when we're doing the confined space rescue, should we have to do one, it's going to be the volunteers that will be probably doing a big majority of it. Okay. And we're taking the training on that irregardless of this agreement. We're already providing the same service for our city staff. We have a written agreement with them as well, and so it's just a bit more of an extension of what we're doing.
Any further questions from members of council? Councillor Oates and Councillor Patterson.
I've got
Councillor Patterson.
Slew of them.
Thank you, Your Worship. In our agreement, there's a service fee in the amount of $10,000 will be paid to the Parksville Volunteer Fire Department each year, and each year that the agreement is in place. Do you have projects in mind for that new income? I'm not sure if income's the right word, but new funding that will go towards the fire department?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Patterson, the funding will provide for or offset some of our training costs for doing this training. It's an ongoing thing that we're doing every year, so and the training is not cheap. By the time you bring somebody in, and the cost for the instructors and and for our members to take the training. We're changing the way we're doing it. We're bringing the instructor over here now, so we'll be able to train about 6 or 8 members for the cost of what it was to get 3 or 4 done in the past.
Councillor Oates.
Okay, so if I understand it correctly, Council's being asked to enter into an agreement between the fire department and the regional district. And in the background information, it's described to us that they require a trained rescue team to be on standby. I note that in the contract there's no mention of us being on standby. It only speaks to providing confined rescue emergency response coverage 24/7, and then several bullets with respect to training and record keeping. There's no mention of the requirement to be on standby, which is what I understand the reason this is before us is because they require someone on standby, and yet the contract doesn't speak to that. So I got several questions. And further it says that you're going to be on standby whenever these locations are entered. So do we have any idea how often these locations are going to be entered? Is this something as a matter of maintenance? And so you're going to be on standby for those, and if so, I think it'd be important for us to know how often to that. In the event of a rescue, we're going to be called anyway, and again, if we're going to be called anyway, I'm not sure why we need an agreement for that, because it's an emergency response thing again, and that doesn't speak to being on standby. And in the background information, it also speaks to, in most cases, the fire department is not required to be on site. That leads me to believe that there are some cases where the fire department would be required to be on site, and I'd like some more information on that. So again, there's not, starting with the first thing, there's no mention of standby in the contract, even though that's what we're being asked to decide. It talks about being on standby whenever they are entered, so the question is how often is that going to happen, if you have any idea. And in most cases, the fire department is not required to be on site. What cases are they required to be on site?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Oates. The agreement will cover off whenever they're entering a site, they will notify us, and if we are tied up at an emergency scene, we simply have to say we're not able to do it, then they don't make the entry. The entries that they're doing are for maintenance purposes only, and they anticipate maybe once or twice a year in some of the different sites, depending on their schedule, their maintenance schedule. So it's very little impact. Most of the sites for the regional district, we won't have to be on site. In the report, sometimes we're on site for public works, like when they do a confined space entry up at Arrowsmith Dam. We attend up there because of travel distance and that. So I see very little impact operationally on the department. The number of times they've entered the sites and that I don't believe we've had to do any rescues as of yet, but that's not to say it won't happen.
Okay, well, since we're not being asked to provide standby service, or the contract doesn't reflect us entering into that agreement, I guess I'm not concerned about that. Part of our obligation under contract is to conduct annual training and practice drills at each type of the confined space. With whom are we going to be conducting this training?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Oates, we would do that in conjunction with the regional district staff. It would be simply, if we're going into a reservoir, we'd use that for one of our training exercises anyways, so which we're doing on a regular basis, and just do it in conjunction with the regional district staff. We would, should Council approve this agreement, we'll be working with them to develop a schedule and how that's going to be implemented.
Just one final point. Do you see this as an enhancement to the fire department with respect to our profile, et cetera? Is this a positive thing, in your opinion?
Your Worship, through the Council, I definitely see it as a positive. It's we're training and using these skills anyways, or developing the skills anyways for our own Public Works Department. So it's an opportunity, I guess, if you will, to broaden that out and help our neighboring jurisdiction.
Any further questions from members of council before I call the vote? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. The next item is from the Director of Community Planning, Clean Air Bylaw to regulate domestic solid fuel burning. Mr. Russell, would you please give us the background on this issue?
Yes, Your Worship, if I may. On October the 20th, Council passed a resolution that staff review wood-burning activities in the City of Parksville with respect to developing options for regulating wood-burning appliances within the city. Staff has prepared a report that provides Council with a couple options, including maintaining the status quo, developing a bylaw that would regulate the installation of new wood stoves and/or the replacement of existing stoves, as well as referring it back to staff for additional information.
Thank you. You move all three?
You're going to do all three?
No, do you want to move them? Can I move all three? I can move all. Well, let's move all three because there'll be a lot of discussion. Moved by Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Discussion. Mr. Powell.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, staff, for a very well-written report. I just have a question, because one of the things I see that we've got, the last piece of this is number 3, the staff be directed to coordinate with the Regional District of Nanaimo to provide appropriate educational and promotional materials about the Provincial Wood Stove Exchange Program. I wonder, because I've done quite a bit of research on this about the education piece, and I'm wondering, because this is through the Mayor to Chief Banks, I know that you have an open house once a year. Would it be possible to combine an education piece with wood-burning stoves, like the appropriate wood, how hot to burn it? Is that too much to ask for? Like, is it too labor-intensive for the volunteer fire department?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Powell, we do have some handouts on wood-burning appliances and that, and it's simply a matter of having those available. I think we've had them at our open houses before. We do get throughout the year a few people coming in asking questions about wood-burning appliances and that, and in a lot of cases and that's for new installations and that sort of thing, and we refer them to the building department, the installation that is covered under the building code.
Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to, I'm not sure who this goes to, probably through to planning, I think. I take it that at present we do not have any clear guidelines or requirements around new installations in new buildings.
If I may, Worship, through to Councillor Bill, we presently do not have any of our own standards with respect to the emission standards that the appliances would meet. We do anticipate probably in the next year or two the province will likely mandate these things, but being able to count on when that will roll out, it's really anybody's guess.
Thank you, and again, thank you, Your Worship. And again, through to planning, has there been any consideration to actually banning the installation of wood-burning devices in new buildings? Has that come up as a topic of consideration?
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Beal, certainly in staff and preparing the report certainly looked at that as an option. It certainly is an option for council if council wishes to pursue that kind of option. From my perspective, I believe the technology is such that new clean burning appliances are actually they meet California emission standards, and and you look at a place like Los Angeles, the kind of air pollution that they have. So I believe the technology will solve a lot of the issues. It's really council, how strongly council feels on that perspective. We're not in, the other, I think, challenge is that we're not in an area that's particularly prone to climactic issues that cause severe smog or other kind of inversions as a result of solid fuel burning. I think there may be isolated instances in specific situations, but I think on a broad trend, I don't believe that we sort of have that kind of challenge here.
Have you asked a question before? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'm not sure, again, where to ask the question, so I'll ask and then either our CEO can direct or
I suggest the Director
someone
of Community Planning first.
and then can go from there. When we have a nuisance type call that basically one of our residents is calling or asking what to do because they have health issues and we have a great deal of smoke that's being generated from a residential home, have we ever had like our fire department come and look at the fire chimney type establishment and everything to make sure that it's not a danger actually to the home itself? I know that when I first bought a home, it had a fireplace in it, so I'm just going to give some background. And when I went to get my insurance and everything, and the age of the house, and we ended up putting in a gas fireplace and when that gas fireplace was put in, that chimney was actually not structurally sound, and it had cracks and everything that could actually have a fire prone to happening because of the age of the home and such. So that's my little background. So I'm not sure, Blaine, Mr. Russell is nodding, so I'm going to direct it towards him.
If I may, Worship, through to Councillor Patterson. It's really like any other building structure. The city certifies a building at the time that it's constructed, but any after, over time, we always advise someone to get their own independent inspection. So whether the condition on a pre-existing stove, it would really be the property owner's responsibility to determine that, subject to purchase or subject to their own maintenance regime. So in summary, the city basically certifies that it meets the building code at the time of initial construction, not throughout its life expectancy. As far as, you also, I believe, had a question about nuisance incidents. The city does have a nuisance bylaw. I can forward it to others who can explain the enforcement provisions of that, but we do have a nuisance bylaw that deals with nuisance situations.
Councillor Oates, your second time.
What's the fine for violating the nuisance abatement bylaw 2013 number 1489 from the mayor through to whoever can answer?
If I may, Your Worship, without the bylaw in front of us, we don't know.
Okay. But I understand there's a mechanism for people who feels that their enjoyment of their property is being infringed upon by activities such as wood burning. There's a mechanism for them to seek recourse through the bylaw department.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Oakes, whenever there is a complaint, it would be dealt with at the bylaw level. If it was sufficient, they would be, I presume, or given a ticket with regards to whatever the infraction was.
Just permit me to jump in here for a moment, Council, because I've been looking at this for a long time, and it's extremely complicated. First of all, in terms of the bigger picture, the RDN allows wood stoves, and they have a criteria for the type of wood stove and approved by the CSA and so forth and so on. When you look again at the overall picture, you've got hydro costs that are going through the roof, and a wood stove or a fireplace is appealing to people in terms of keeping those costs down, and if you use wood, it's a renewable resource. The problem arises if you get someone who doesn't do it properly, uses wet wood or whatever the case may be, then you incur problems for your neighbors. That having been said, if you look at, and the fire chief can jump in here for me if he wants to, but in looking at certain cases that have been brought to my attention, you don't enter somebody's property at any point in time that you'd like to. In most cases, you need a court order, and a court order is very, very, very difficult to obtain. So to go to somebody's house and say, we're going to come into your house, we're going to take away your wood stove. Ms. Comas, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's rarely done because of the laws of the land and because of the impediments. A man or a woman's house is their castle, and that's primary in law. So it's an extremely complicated and difficult situation. The bigger cities, some bigger cities in Canada have banned them, but it's a 7-year program to ban the use of wood stoves and remove them. And I don't know how you do that in terms of monitoring and getting all that information. Bottom line is, for a city like Parksville to get into really intense monitoring and things like that, you can bet your bottom dollar our costs would go up significantly, because this is issues that happen 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So on that note, Councillor Oates.
That presumes that the bylaw contemplates any wood-burning appliances and any level of acceptable amount of smoke. Mr. Mayor, we certainly have the ability to pass a bylaw that says no wood-burning appliances whatsoever, similar to what the City of Montreal has done, similar to what the state of Utah is going through as we speak today. They're going through public hearings on this. So certainly the ability exists for us to tackle this problem. I'm not sure that the political will is there, but I do know that the ability for us to tackle this problem is there. I do recognize that it's that there will be arguments made about it being a self-sufficient way to provide heat for people, and I have a lot of empathy for that. I personally enjoy a fire, but I do also recognize that combusting something creates toxic vapors and clouds into the atmosphere. It's the nature of the chemical reaction that happens. It happens. And, living here where we do, in this part of the country where we pride ourselves of being on the leading edge of environmental initiatives, I think it behooves this council to have a serious look at what our future holds, and do we want wood stoves? Really, if the regional district's doing it, fine. People that want wood stoves perhaps can move to the regional district. But maybe we should look at being an environmental leader and seeing what the implications would be of banning all wood-burning appliances. That would require a sunset clause or a grandfathering or something that would be years down the road so that people could get used to the idea. But we could simply change our rules so that any new houses do not have we will not approve building new houses that have wood-burning appliances in it. So, there are people in this town that have immediate problems. It sounds to me like their best relief is going to come through the nuisance abatement bylaw. But I believe that there will come a time when wood-burning appliances will be they will be simply banned. The Environmental Protection Agency in the U.S. just brought in a new set of regulations that in effect makes 80% of the wood-burning appliances in North America today illegal once they come into effect. So it's coming. We can choose to be at the forefront or be following.
Thank you for those comments. I would respectfully suggest to you that there's arguments to be made on both sides of the spectrum in terms of the pollution factor of wood-burning stoves. The particular complaints or two that I have is not against wood-burning stoves. It's against the neighbor who's burning wet wood. So that's not what the issue is. But if you read the documentation that I've read, it's debatable whether or not it's that clear, cut and dry that wood-burning stoves, proper wood-burning stoves, are that type of pollutant. But I'm not an expert in it. Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I've listened to the arguments, I've read the information, and I think I agree with Councillor Oates that it's about political will. And I know that there's been issues with one person in particular with his neighbor. And I'm curious, and I don't know if this is out of line, maybe it is, but has any complaint been made already through the bylaw officer? And so, so that hasn't happened. I think that I support, excuse me,
Sir, you're not, this is not your meeting.
No. A complaint has been made.
Thank you very much. That's enough.
And I also support what Councillor Beale said in the way of any new development or any new houses would not have wood-burning stoves in them. And I think eventually we have to start. Like, I understand, too, that is it going to be a financial hardship for people to not have wood stoves? Or is it going to be, like, I don't know what that balance is. I know that people are sick by wood smoke, and to me, that's a #1 issue. So, yeah, I would support the political will. Let's do it.
Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do think, although for, depending where you are in this whole discussion or topic, it may seem very clear-cut, but nonetheless, I think it is quite complex, and I do think that it would pose or could pose a real hardship financially for people if everything was banned at this point in time. I think that there will be a development over time towards cleaner burning or, in fact, elimination. But I do think that we can look at new buildings, and also, again, going back to the nuisance bylaw for those individuals who are strongly and directly affected at this point in time. And with respect to your the mayor's comments, the standards that are going to be updated by the province in the coming year include setting standards for opacity, I hope I pronounced that correctly, of smoke from burning appliances. And I have also done a fair bit of research on this, and in some jurisdictions that is actually what they use, and complaints to the bylaw office or actually go through the fire department, and they go out and look at the opacity, and there's a short period of time during which there may be some visible smoke, but that by 20 minutes, it should be clear as a way to measure this. So I am hopeful that for those individuals in the short term that something can be addressed through a nuisance bylaw. I do have a question, and two questions actually. One is, as our bylaw stands, is it sufficient to address a concern about wood smoke, or is more precise language required? That's one question.
Mr. Russell?
If I may, Your Worship, I don't think we'll know that until it's ultimately tested. I don't believe it's been used in a case of smoke from a wood stove. So that the proof is in the pudding's in the eating, as they say.
Do we have any idea how many wood stoves there are in the city of Parksville, including fireplaces? Do we have any ballpark figure? None whatsoever.
We have no stats on that.
Further comments? Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a complex issue, and we haven't had, from what I understand from the city, we've only had one complaint. And yet, I believe there's hundreds of fireplaces and wood-burning stoves in the city. And to that effect, I don't think that we can have a knee-jerk reaction here and start making up bylaws and so on before we know exactly what the problems are and how many wood stove burning outfits there are. So we should be a little cautious on how we move on this and find out exactly where the problems lie, and if the problem is that great that we need to make some changes.
Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Councillor Greer. I think you put that very, very well. And in the research that I've done, jurisdictions would suggest that, in fact, a starting point to decide how much of an issue you have is to get some of that information. Going back to the provincial changes that are anticipated, do we know, do we have assurances that those changes will be exacted in 2015 as proposed? And I'm wondering if we should, on behalf of council, shall we write the province to support these changes coming into effect in the near future?
You could make that motion. As to whether or not the province is going to definitely do it, I don't think anybody around this table will know that for sure, but that would certainly be an option that the city could write if you wanted to make that motion, that the city write to the province requesting that these proposed 2015 changes be certainly implemented. Do you want to make that motion? Yes?
Your Worship, you've got a motion on the floor. You should deal with that and leave it arising.
Councillor Patterson?
Yes, I echo Councillor Beale's sentiments, but I'm wondering if that would be something that a resolution towards our UBCM could be looked at, that we can gain support from other municipalities as well. I'm not sure. It's just a comment.
Just that the letter could be sent almost immediately, whether it's UBCM isn't going to be held until the fall. Another aspect of all of this is that the reason I know it's complicated, and I know that there's all kinds of issues regarding clean air and non-polluting air. I'm wondering if what I see being recommended tonight is I'd rather walk before I run, and I think that this gets us walking towards some kind of a solution that we can monitor over time. But I'll leave that up to council. Personally, it's a complicated issue. The particular case that I know about in Parksville is that I don't think the individual wants to rid us of fireplaces. It's a nuisance issue. It's not a wood-burning stove issue, because the individual has a wood-burning stove. It's the neighbor that's not cooperating with the type of materials or the type of wood that should be being burnt. So that's another issue. But I'm going to close off the debate unless anybody has any more comments they'd like to make. Councillor Oates.
So for clarity, we're voting on a motion that has 3 pieces to it. I want to focus on the second piece. So the motion is that we're going to direct staff to develop a clean air bylaw to address new installation or replacement. Nothing about existing. We're going to say that can be covered under nuisance bylaw or something. This is just for new installation or replacement of appliances or fireplaces.
Yes. Any further comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. But it's certainly something to follow. The next item we have is, again, regarding air quality impacts from resource management, fires, and outdoor burning. Mr. Russell, would you please give us the background on this issue?
If I may, Your Worship, at the October 20th Council meeting, staff was directed to review the city's outdoor burning bylaw. Staff has reviewed that bylaw. Under the current bylaw, outdoor burning, with the exception of small campfires, barbecues, those kind of fires, are basically already prohibited except for on lands that have either agriculture as a permitted land use or that are located within the agricultural land reserve. We believe that the community charter enables a municipal government to pass a complete ban on outdoor burning, which could be extended to lands within the city boundary that have agriculture or within the agricultural land reserve.
Thank you. Do I have a mover and a seconder? We'll go for the 3 motions we get to. Councillor Oates, seconded by Councillor Greer. Discussion. I can jump in here if you don't mind. Sitting at the RDN table, we were, on behalf of Parksville, I was very, very outspoken with regards to the fiasco that we had last Thanksgiving. That was a travesty, and made my comments very, very clear that should have never been allowed to happen. And there were some folk that dropped the ball there, including the provincial Ministry of Environment, in terms of not asking the right questions of the person that was burning a multiple number of large piles of debris. I had a discussion with Mr. Russell earlier this week last week when this was being put forward on the agenda, and I intend to pursue on your behalf with the regional district to find out what they can do, much like what we've done in banning outdoor burning. Because we are surrounded by ALR lands that belong to the RDN. And we don't want this type of thing happening again. There are other ways, they're more expensive and all of that sort of thing, but there's got to be other ways to never let that happen again. I don't think we ever want to see that happen again. I thought there was a fire across the street from my house. The smoke was so bad. So just to keep that in mind, Mr. Russell tells me, and I believe him, that the RDN don't have the authority to do like we've done. We can ban outdoor burning on our ALR lands, and we can ban outdoor burning like we've done. But Mr. Russell, do you want to add a little bit to that?
If I may, Your Worship, as a municipal government under the community charter, we have the additional ability to regulate things under the purview of health, and it's under those parameters that we have additional authority that a regional government does not. Councillor Oates.
So if I understand this correctly, if we approve this, the bylaw would, what the bylaw would enable us, what the bylaw would prevent is people clearing, disposing of cleared agricultural land by way of fire within the boundaries of the city of Parksville. But it has no impact on the RDN land. Okay, so that's what I understood. So I think it would be very helpful for a representative to the RDN to be able to go up and say, look what we did in Parksville, you guys should consider it. So I'm fully in support of this initiative.
Any further comments or questions? Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. As far as the backyard burning bylaw that we have, one of the things that happened is there's people that were burning all they redid their home, and they were burning everything in the backyard. They did it on the weekend. What number would we call? I was directed to call the fire department.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Powell, the fire department does receive a number of complaints over the years regarding backyard burning. The majority of those calls a few of them have come directly to the fire hall themselves, and I think the biggest majority have come through 911 calls. People phone, and our duty officer will go out and investigate and have a look, and in most cases it's just educating the person on the bylaw and what is and what isn't allowed.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. Once we put this burning bylaw into rereading and everything, are we going to be contacting the ALR lands that are within the city limit to let them know of the changes, so that they can look at chipping and other types of ways to get rid of their waste?
Who wants to handle that? CAO?
If I may, Your Worship, directly contacting them when we make a change to the bylaws, not something that we usually do. It's the responsibility of the property owner to inquire to find out what is permissible as opposed to the other way around.
Councillor Oates?
But I understand it still would be advertised in the normal fashion in the newspapers 2 consecutive weeks, blah, blah, blah.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Oates, it's not a type of bylaw that's subject to public hearing, so it wouldn't have any advertising requirement. It's not a change in land use.
One further comment on this from me. I know that the public health official, Dr. Hasselbeck, is involved with not only with us but with the RDN, and I intend to meet a lot more often with Dr. Hasselbeck on this particular issue, because there's no doubt it is an issue. And one of the things that we must never forget is during the burning last Thanksgiving, there were a lot of people that had to go to the Oceanside Health Center to get on oxygen, people that had bronchial conditions, and it was quite horrendous. So I think that in dealing also with the province and the public health officer, that we'll get more and more information and more details on this whole issue of outdoor burning. Any further questions, comments? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Just before I move on, Ms. Comas, a moment ago, Councillor Beale made a motion, and I'm wondering if now would be the proper time for Councillor Beale to make that motion, get a seconder, and we can move on to the next item. Councillor Beale, do you want to make that motion? I believe your motion was to write to the appropriate provincial officials, telling them that we look forward to them passing those particular clean air bylaws.
That is correct.
Thank you. I have a seconder for that. Councillor Greer. Discussion? All those in favor? Thank you, Councillor Beale, for that. Okay, the next item, we're on to item F. Again, the Director of Community Planning. It's the consideration of a building inspection service policy regarding new building code ventilation and energy requirements. Mr. Russell.
Sure, if I may, Your Worship. In December this year, or December 2014, the province has implemented some new building code requirements with respect to energy and as well as ventilation systems within buildings. And basically some of these requirements are, for example, in some commercial or industrial building, additional installation, that ventilation systems now operate on a full-time basis. Some very exciting things for our building inspectors. In some cases, with respect to the energy requirements, there's been over 100 new pages of building code requirements added to the building code. The report before Council is, with this new code implementation, is to get to be clear on what level of inspection service the city is providing with regards to these new requirements. If the city is silent on its requirements, it actually puts the city, in my opinion, at some risk, and that the public may have certain expectations that may or not be actually provided for. So what staff have proposed is a policy on a level inspection of service that we believe that we're able to undertake with the resources that we have, which is basically a plan check of the initial item and a visual inspection that the works have been installed, but basically to that kind of level, and the rest is as per the staff report.
Thank you for that. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendations? Councillor Oates, Councillor Beale. Discussion. Councillor Oates.
I believe I read in here somewhere, there's a concern that we could be under some legal liability if in the absence of such a policy.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Oates, I believe that to be correct, that the city needs a formal policy to say what level. It reduces our risk by having a formal policy that says to what level we're doing it at, and that way we're managing public expectations.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Director of Planning. In the financial impact, and it says that Schedule A attached will cost approximately $11,500. And can you go into a little bit more detail, because I'm not quite understanding the cost involved on page 59 of 80.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Patterson, that's an estimate based on the additional hours, the time frame involved of rolling staff out to do the inspection. So we're looking at costs and salary equivalent between, if we do a basic service of the equivalent of about $3,700 to moving up to potentially $11,500 with a more intensive inspection service on those matters.
Follow up, Your Worship. So basically, because it's an added staff time, that we're looking at approximately a half hour extra to do the inspection. Is that what I'm, per application, I think it was on page 60? Is that the correct kind of look at the dollar figure?
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Patterson, that's correct for the proposal that staff has proposed. So we anticipate with that there'd be approximately half an hour additional time. If we were to go to a full inspection service, we'd be looking at minimum an hour and a half to 2 hours per inspection.
And this is based on new construction?
This will be based on any new construction or renovation triggering a building permit.
Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That's carried. Once again, you're on a roll, Mr. Russell. The consideration of a development permit for 826 Island Highway West. Would you please give us the background on this particular project?
If I may, Your Worship, so before council consideration this evening is a facade upgrade to a portion of Wembley Mall that previously or currently, soon to be previously, holds the BC Liquor Store. That's being replaced with a Red Apple retailer. And actually, if you look on page 68 of the agenda, you can see what the current sort of facade looks like with the liquor store compared to what is being proposed. So that's, anyways, it's for council consideration for development permit issuance.
Okay, mover and a seconder, moved by Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Discussion. Discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Once again, Mr. Russell, you're still here. To affirm the services of the Advisory Planning Commission, I want to remind Council, we are being requested to receive this for information. Mr. Russell, if you would, please.
If I may, Your Worship, the purpose of the background report is just to inform Council, a reminder to existing Council members and new Council members of the role of the Advisory Planning Commission. We are in the process of preparing advertising for this body, and it seemed an opportune time just to go through the role of the Advisory Planning Commission. Its primary function is really to provide council with input, with a representative of public input, an informed public who have been given some more details than typically on development applications, and the rest is as per the report.
And they've been doing a great job. Moved by Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Any questions we received for information? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Today, we had 7 of our advisory that their terms ended in December. Is this correct?
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Patterson, this commission set up a little differently, so they're basically staggered. There's 7 members in total. There's a 4 and 3. So I think we have 4 members right now, and three positions I believe are available.
So has there been any advisory design meetings that they've sat in on? I guess not this year.
There hasn't been this year. We typically hold anywhere from, on average, I would say 2 to 4 advisory planning commission meetings. Some years we've had 6 or 8, but it can vary quite a bit. And this is typically land use change applications.
Follow-up? So we're going to receive this for information, and then you're going to start advertising for commission members.
If I may, Your Worship, to Councillor Patterson, that is correct.
And how long a time period do you foresee that to take?
We usually allow for about a month of advertising to collect applications. I should say that in the case of rezoning applications, it doesn't actually impact timelines at all. There's a number of steps in what is a fairly complex process that we are able to insert the Advisory Planning Commission review. So we have done them sometimes during the initial technical review period of an application. Usually that's about a 2 to 3 month process to do all the technical work. So there's always ample opportunity during that process. We've also referred applications to the Advisory Planning Commission at a later stage, such as after first reading, typically when the developer is hosting their open house. So I don't anticipate any application timelines being impacted at all.
Thank you.
Further comments or questions? I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. never-ending evening for you, Mr. Russell. Once again, to undertake minor housekeeping amendments to improve the clarity and consistency of the zoning and development bylaws. Mr. Russell, give us some background on these two recommendations.
Sorry, I need a sip of water. If I may, Your Worship. From time to time, in administering bylaws, we do notice some trends or issues with wording in bylaws that can stand for some clarification, or there's some inconsistencies. Before Council this evening is a proposed bylaw amendment to address an issue that we have with our lot line definition. So we currently have a scenario where on double fronting lots, what most people would call a rear lot line is actually subject to both a rear lot line and an exterior lot line. This bylaw change proposes it to make it strictly a rear lot line, consistent with other bylaw definitions for lot line. The other amendment was, with respect to food catering facilities and mobile, like food trucks or food trailers. So under our food catering facility or restaurant type regulation, those types of vans are permissible as are trucks, but due to a peculiarity in the wording of one of our general prohibition section, we had this inconsistency where trailers were not. So this bylaw basically sorts it out so the specific type of vehicle that you own isn't the criteria of whether or not you can have a food vendor.
Thank you for that. Any questions or comments? Councillor Oates.
The amendment or the change to the to define exterior lot line, how would that affect my neighbor if he were one of these? What could he not do tomorrow that he could do today?
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Oates, it really depends on if your neighbor has a double fronting lot or not. Under the current regulations, because in the case where you have a restrictive regulation, whatever is more restrictive is the one that obviously takes precedence. So right now, if you have a lot that has a road on each end of it, you kind of get hit with the equivalent of 2 front yard setbacks. You get a 7.5 meter setback on your front yard, which is standard, but then you get this extra 7.5 meter setback on your rear yard due to the double road. A normal single-family residential lot would, for a dwelling, would have a 3 meter setback from its rear lot line, and this would make those double fronting lots consistent with the same regulations that normal, more regular residential lots would be subject to.
Any more questions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Okay, we have some bylaws this evening that I'd like to go through with you, and if you don't mind, I'll read the recommendation. The first and second reading is the Zoning and Development Amendment Bylaw 2015, number 2099, and the recommendation is that the Zoning and Development Amendment Bylaw 2015-2099 be read a first and second time. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Greer. Questions, comments? All those in favor? That's carried. B1, third reading, Zoning and Development Amendment Bylaw 2014, number 2097. Third reading. Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Greer. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That's carried. And finally, Zoning and Development Bylaw Amendment Bylaw 2014, number 2098. Mover, Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor, do I have a seconder? Councillor Beale. All those in favor? Oh, sorry, discussion. Moving too fast.
Mr. Mayor, at the January 19th public hearing, there was a reference to a letter from de Gagne. That was on page 79 of that package. There was a couple of concerns that were addressed, and I know in other correspondence that I've seen with respect to this, there's been some response given to the people that wrote them. I wonder if there was any response to that particular letter.
Ms. Comas, would you care to handle that?
Are you referring to the letter that was submitted for the public hearing? Oh, no, we don't traditionally provide a response to those letters. They're submitted for the information of council.
Are you referring to the gentleman that got up in the audience and said, I got invited at 7 o'clock? No?
Two things. You've already done that, and your microphone's not on. You've already done that bylaw, and your microphone is not on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, so I have. Well, why is that? Oh, okay, I read them before. We're done. So I call for, slowly, I call now for new business, and I'm going to go around the table tonight so that we get this right. Councillor Patterson, we'll start with you. Do you have anything under new business?
Not at this time. I just wanted to say that I did attend the Pacific Salmon Foundation dinner on Saturday, and they did have a presentation by that really long acronym, Mid-Island Habitat Society, which is fabulous to see. This organization, this was, I think, the 16th dinner, and they've raised over $400,000 going back into salmon and conservation and everything in our community. So it's really amazing to see.
And you had salmon for supper.
I did have salmon for supper.
Thank you very much.
Oysters, fresh oysters.
Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was going to make 4 or 5 motions, but I've put those aside for now. But I would like to say that the money that I'm collecting for the coldest night, I haven't received anything from the city here, or staff, or councillors. So if you'd like to donate, I'm here for the donations, and you can help the Parksville Panthers to try to raise maybe $2,500. Thank you.
My check is waiting for you. I'll give it to you tonight. Thank you. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a motion I would like to put forward. The Council approve the planting of a memorial tree and plaque on PCTC property in the memory of former Mayor Alan Hustwick, community builder, as well as place the Hustwick name on a list of potential street names for future streets in Parksville.
Just before I ask for a vote on this, I met Alan Hustwick once at the opening of Hustwick Place. I know that he brought Parksville into cityhood, if there's such a word as that. In other words, before Parksville was a city, when he became mayor, it became a city. And I know that he was also the vice chair of the RDN during his stage in politics with us. I believe he was in politics for a number of years. He served as a councillor, and then he served as a mayor. So I would think that this is very fitting that we acknowledge him and all of the good work that he did as a community builder for the city of Parksville. So any other comments? On that note, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Anything else, Councillor Powell? Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just like to report that I did attend the Local Government Leadership Academy over a couple of days was held at Tainamera, and it was an intense time, starting at 7 or 7:30 in the morning and going all day. But it was wonderful, a great opportunity to meet councillors and mayors from across the island, and have mentoring sessions and some really good informative sessions. So I thank the city for this opportunity for learning.
You'll find that when you go to the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities, as well as the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, you'll find that repeats itself. It's a great opportunity to talk and meet with other people. Councillor Oates.
Okay, this will only take 45 minutes or so. I just want to echo what Councillor Beale said. I too also attended those sessions over at Tainamera last week there. They were very good. It was great to interact with councils from other parts of Vancouver Island, and I think that we probably stack up well against any of those councils, so we can take them if the going gets tough. What I would like to make a motion, though, Your Worship, if I may. There was a letter that was written to you as mayor, received here on the 19th of January from the Canadian Union of Postal Workers, requesting for support to save Canada Post. And what they're asking that we do is that we pass a resolution. So if I may, I'd like to move a motion that we pass the resolution. I'd be happy to read it out.
Yes, please do.
Whereas Canada Post and the Conservatives are taking an axe to long-treasured postal services, killing good jobs, eliminating door-to-door delivery, drastically increasing postage rates, and closing, downsizing, and reducing rates at post offices. Whereas Canada Post did not properly consult on these changes, effectively eliminating any opportunity for input from the people who will be most effective. And whereas closing and downsizing post offices, reducing post office hours, and eliminating door-to-door delivery will reduce service and eliminate thousands of jobs in communities throughout our country. And whereas Canada Post offers a public service that needs to be protected, be it resolved that Parksville read a letter to the minister responsible for Canada Post that calls on the government to reverse the changes to services announced by Canada Post and to look instead for ways to increase service and revenues in areas such as postal banking. And be it further resolved that Parksville asked the Federation of Canadian Municipalities to request that the federal government consult with the public about what kind of public postal service they need before allowing Canada Post to make such major changes to public postal service. Got a seconder? I'd speak to that. Yes, Mr. Mayor, I did some, I contacted these folks, asked for some background information as to who had supported this. I was informed that there's 430 different municipalities across Canada that have written similar letters or passed similar resolutions. There are 11 municipal organizations or bodies across Canada. 21 of the municipalities exist here in British Columbia. The Union of British Columbia Municipalities have passed a similar resolution. The Lower Mainland Local Government Association has passed a similar resolution. And the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Big Cities Mayors Caucus has passed a similar resolution. I believe that the Canada Postal Service is part of the fabric of our country, and we should be supporting the postal workers in this endeavor. So I would like to see council support in passing that resolution, and those letters get written to the two levels that they were written to.
Any comments from members of council? Councillor Green.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not able to support that because I think the Postal Service in the long run is something that will dwindle aside because of the time it takes and the cost of running it. And just sooner or later, it's gone. And to keep something that's half dead alive is not in my best interest. Anyways, thank you.
Well, I enjoyed the cartoons when they decided that one of the reasons why they were going to make those changes, it was going to be great for seniors. There were cartoons of seniors climbing over snowbanks and climbing up little hills and all that sort of thing. So on that note, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, thank you. That's carried.
And I hope you walk 6 miles to get your mail there now.
Barefoot.
We don't have that in Parksville.
Now, if you'll indulge me, I have a couple of things that I want to bring up tonight before we end. I've got some items under new business. I met with the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere folk who are working diligently to develop some programs to promote the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere. On February the 19th, and I'm going to ask our executive assistant to post this in the entranceway at the City Hall here. On February 19th, there's going to be a lecture given by the director of Salmon Fraser University's Institute for Environmental Learning, Dr. David Zandevelt, and it's moving sustainability education forward in BC. They also gave me a couple of documents that they're working with the First Nations in terms of developing MOUs as they participate in the biosphere management, the biosphere organization. So I just wanted to mention that to council. I attended on last Thursday night the dinner for the installing the new chancellor at VIU, Vancouver Island University, Louise Manzel. Very highly qualified lady, and very, very lucky to have her in our midst. I think at some point in time we'd like to invite her to Parksville to give us a talk about her issues, which are mostly First Nations issues, very, very important issues on treaties and treaty negotiations. And lastly, but not least, I had the pleasure of eating haggis, I think for the second time in my life. I went to the Legion as they invited the mayor to attend the Robbie Burns supper, and actually the haggis wasn't bad. I've had worse. It wasn't bad at all. But I have to tell you, what I was impressed with, we had some entertainment, and it consisted of the Highland dancing gals, and I forget the name of the school, and I should have brought that with me. But they were very impressive. They ranged in age from 5 years old to probably mid-teens, and they were excellent, boys and girls, mainly girls, but they did an excellent performance. And the Legion, also one of our great organizations, do great work. And I had a chance to talk to Sue Hodges, who's the president of the Legion, that I hadn't really formally met before, and we talked about a lot of things and her plans for the Legion, which are exciting, and I'll leave those to her to talk to you about at the appropriate time. So on that note, that's about it. Can I call for an adjournment? Councillor Greer, Councillor Oates, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.